So hi guys, I'm here to tell you about the story of SnapScan, how we built it, the challenges we faced. Hopefully it's interesting for you guys. So SnapScan is an app that you use to pay for real things in real shops in the real world. It's been our baby for the past 5 years. It wasn't the first fintech thing we did. Previously we've been in the space a bit, but most notably we worked with Mixit. We helped them add sort of a real money wallet to the existing digital-only closed-loop wallet. So we weren't completely clueless, we had some kind of connections going in. But we were very keen to do our own kind of project with our own rules and see what we can do and build something fun and cool that we actually like using ourselves. As you said, so we were basically just 4 guys in a room. Starting out, we didn't know that much, but what we did know is that on the one hand that startup rules are a thing. Startup rules are very easy. You have to do something or you die, because that's the entire point of doing startup. You're trying to create value. You absolutely do not know how to, whatever you think you know in terms of generating value is just wrong. And the only way of finding out why you're wrong and how you're wrong is building something, putting it in front of people and going, well, okay, we were wrong. It's a bit of a thing, being wrong. So this basically means that what you're doing is you're trying to fail faster all the time. The quicker you can fail, the quicker you can try something new, and which means you're optimizing essentially for iteration speed above all else. On the other hand, we're now looking sort of at the fintech space because we have sort of fintech experience. We also know a bit about smartphones, and we have some kind of connections with banks and things. So we're now like, okay, how is this going to be different from normal startup rules? Sort of feels like it's a bit more grown up, and suddenly we have to worry about things like things like can't actually lose users' money or their trust. This feels relatively important. Security matters probably a bit more than a normal startup. A normal startup you can completely cowboy it, but yeah, probably matters a bit. And at some stage, compliance is going to happen to us, and it's going to be unpleasant. Compliance is a big thing, and obviously pretty much anything in the financial space is regulated, and if you're a startup, that is interesting. So sort of the initial question these kind of problems gives us is that how do we fail fast in a world that's sort of regulated? Because suddenly it's not just like with a normal startup, if you do it and it fails and flames out horribly, then you basically end up looking like an idiot. So if you've sort of got personal reputation risk or professional reputation risk, you might not be able to get a job again or something like that. But it feels like if you're doing a fintech, you might end up losing users' money, and that would be very embarrassing or awkward, and it's not really something we'd like to do at all, given a choice. More explicitly, on the one hand, we want to fail fast, but on the other hand, we have to worry. And these two things are not necessarily mutually compatible at all, so trade-offs need to be made. What is useful in terms of thinking about this for us is going, okay, fine, there's trade-offs to be made, and whenever you're taking a trade-off, you're taking on some risk. Like obvious examples of trade-off here is something like, you guys all know there's sort of a trade-off between sort of UI and security. Like if you build something that's really great and really pretty, it's probably not going to have great security, but because security is annoying to implement, annoying for users, and so on. But if these kind of things do conflict as well. If you sort of look at building something quickly, then you're quite possibly going to be exposing your chance of actually just losing money because you're going to be taking a risk, you're going to be making hacks, taking shortcuts, that kind of thing. Even if you look at sort of these rules, they are not mutually compatible. If you sort of look at sort of security and compliance, amusingly, these two things do contradict each other. You'll have sort of compliance requirements going, well, you actually have to do password rotation, and password rotation isn't like a cool thing to do anymore, for the past 5 years, but it's still the compliance rules, so now you have to go a big one. I think sort of the key thing here is to go like, okay, fine, you're going to be taking on risks. Sometimes you can quantify them, and that's useful. What we did initially is that, we were only doing like 1,000 rands worth of transactions a day or something, right? And that's super not scary. If it goes wrong, you can literally sort of go from your own bank account, give $1,000 to a guy, and it's fine. Nobody's going to care about that at all. So that was that start. And the other thing we had sort of a limited float account, and so every time a transaction happened, we transferred money from a float account to a specific merchant. That was a real bank account, so like on the bank side there was like a set amount of money that was in it, and it couldn't go over that. And it's got bank grade security, so what could possibly go wrong? In this case that was an okay bet, but it's not usually, it turns out. that was also cool, because I mean, obviously at some stage we got enough transactions, and our float account essentially just sort of hit its limit, and we sort of started having to sort of top that thing up on a regular basis. So it was pretty interesting to see sort of as we go along, our sort of confidence grew, and our risk appetite grew along with it. So this is still sort of the standard kind of stuff. I mean, if you look at sort of startup, essentially mythology or whatever you want to call it, in terms of building stuff, you've got like the typical kind of things. I mean, like the number one thing you care about, I mean, you want to get users traction or whatever, or you die. But also, we really care about not losing users' money. But also, we want to build as little as possible because, I mean, whatever we're building is probably wrong. But also, we care about figuring out, finding out, like, or making sure that if we do happen to lose someone's money, we want to be able to go back in time and figure out exactly what went wrong and sort of give them the money back. And also, we have to worry about the things being compliant because we're playing in a pretty grown-up space. So you've got like a bunch of big guys, and eventually big guys will notice we exist, and they may or may not just stamp us down and kill us and make us go away. The non-goals, I think, is sort of the more interesting thing. I don't know how much your kind of general sort of personal dogmas align to sort of various sort of programming practices and things like that. But typical sort of startup non-goals involve things like intentionally taking chances and not always testing all the things. And that's sort of tricky to do if you've got good devs. I mean, as soon as you've got good devs and they know what the right way of doing things is, then they want to build things well. And realigning that into sort of a world where your essential kind of expected lifetime for your company is 1 to 3 months. Because I mean, I don't think we even planned past 2 months in the first first half a year or something. That's tricky. So I mean, the core kind of trick we try to do is sort of go like, okay, fine. What we're going to be worrying about is building a product versus building tech, and that sort of generally worked. That's the reason why this kind of thing is like super important. By the way, I suspect like if you're kind of coming from sort of a traditional company background, this is the kind of stuff that's sort of offensive and weird. But the reason why this kind of stuff is important is we just threw so much stuff away. Now most of this stuff is things we threw away in 2013. So in less than a year, a bunch of things we did. We built a whole bunch of demo sites because I mean that's obviously how we test things. We built the sign-up process. We built some backend tooling. We integrated with multiple PSPs, 4 or 5. We don't actually know. Multiple sort of different backend systems for keeping balances for merchants. We did Australian rollout. We actually sort of built the entire thing there to enable us to go live there. We did a US thing. We were actually live in the US for a couple of months. Apple was white labeled. We had BlackBerry support because BlackBerry still existed. We even had sort of a login thing via QR code, so you can sort of go to a website and scan, with SnapScan and log into a site. We had a patent on that. All kinds of things we did, but we threw it all away. After you do that enough, you sort of get over sort of your emotional attachment to caring about code that much. That and the fear of impending doom. So I mean, that's kind of question I think to ask any sane person will ask is like, are we complete and utter idiots? Because that's obviously super wasteful. No sort of smart and useful person should throw away that much work. The answer is I don't know, maybe. Just a quick context. When we started out, we basically had sort of 2 Rails apps lying around from previous things, using Mongo and so on. In our kind of previous iteration with Mixit, we used sort of a Java/Scala stack. At that stage, we were very concerned about corporates and banks and so on will not be cool with us running Rails. They just won't know how to deploy it and things like that. I think our kind of thinking there was quite flawed. So our assumption there was that they were going to be, we'd sort of pass them like a WAR file or whatever, and they'd sort of chuck it on the infrastructure, and magically things will happen. But I think fundamentally, as soon as you sort of give your deployment process over to someone else, you completely lose your quick iteration ability. So I think that's actually sort of a non-starter in retrospect. On the phone side, we had an iPhone app. The reason why we focused on iPhone and not Android is pretty obvious. We needed money, and people with money have iPhones. It's also sort of convenient that iPhone is a bit easier to develop for. So iPhone app is a custom HTML5 app. PhoneGap didn't exist yet, so I had like custom bridges and things, and lots of fun. So our initial attempt was to sort of tackle the problem of shopping cart abandonment. Shopping cart abandonment is on an e-commerce site. The user goes, logs in, it sort of selects a bunch of things to buy, ends up in a shopping cart, but then for whatever reason, the user logs out and doesn't complete the purchase. Obviously, if you can sort of gain any kind of percentage there, it's sort of a big win for a retailer, or that's what we assume, because it's like literally just goes straight to the bottom line. So our scheme was that we can somehow convince users to install the application and then enter the credit card details in it. And then on an e-commerce site, they'll have like a little widget where you can sort of scan it, and all the user details automatically get sent through with the credit card details, and sort of the entire sign-up thing gets condensed away. And magically, the bucket goes better, or the funnel goes better at least. We even managed to get like a certain big retailer to integrate with us, or to completely integrate. Well, they actually didn't integrate with us, but thank goodness they didn't go live, because this is obviously a terrible idea. In the real world, it doesn't make any sense for a merchant to promote sort of a tool that allows other sites to just sign up users quicker. There's no way that we as a team of 4 people can convince people to install the app for this. Crucially, in this model, we tried very hard to avoid actually doing payments, because we knew enough about the space to go, it's really hard. Lots of things are going to go wrong, they slip, it's basically horribleness all around. And we also know that doing physical payments is basically the worst thing in the world we can do, because it's just sort of magnified by an order of magnitude. Not people sitting comfortably at home with their Wi-Fi. It's like in the real world, sun shining on phones, things like that. So we were definitely explicitly said multiple times it's a terrible idea and we never should do this, which obviously means that we did it. So what we did is we thought, okay, cool, we had an opportunity to explore this. And we figured that a useful place to target initially was farmers markets over weekends. We figured this was a good bet because basically rich people go there, rich people have phones and credit cards, which is great. Cash is sort of scarce maybe due to ATMs being not generally available. And on a merchant side, credit card machines are not necessarily pervasive. Largely right about it. So before the 5 devs of us and the 1 non-dev who at that stage sort of went there. There's a Devi people trying there, and we sort of stood there and sort of tried to convince people to install our application and enter their credit card details, which went better than it should have. And I think all around, but I think some people had their Eden talents. It turns out that ultimately our secret for getting people to install it was, just giving them cash didn't really work, but bribing them with either beer or coffee mugs seemed to work quite well. Ultimately, markets not great. Problem obviously with markets is it only happens once a week. The average user doesn't necessarily go every week. So you have slow iteration speed, and if you have a lifetime horizon of a company of somewhere between 1 and 3 months, depending on who's asking, then only being able to do sort of 1 test a week, that's not a way to end up in any kind of happy place at all. Okay, so this is sort of a classic chicken and egg problem we end up having. The general SnapScan problem as it is. So on the one side you have users, and users have absolutely no reason to install the application if there are no merchants who they can pay it with. And on the flip side, obviously, merchants are not going to bother adding that to the system if they don't have users that can actually use it. Now, this is a marketplace problem. Marketplace problems are notoriously hard. Coupled with that, on top of this, we have a problem where we're trying to change user behavior, which is also notoriously hard. So that's on a negative column. On the positive side, we thought it was pretty cool and people seemed to like it. But we had absolutely no idea how to go forward with this. Fortunately, at this stage, we essentially locked into getting a guy called Lex Bayer as our advisor. It was sort of incredibly useful just talking to someone who's been in this space. So Lex previously had a couple of payments startups in the US, and he sort of exited to PayPal. He's now at Airbnb. And he basically told us it's going to be okay, and we should keep the faith. And this is basically how it goes. And just having someone say that ends up being incredibly useful, because I mean, I suspect if we didn't, it would have stopped just then. So one of the big questions we have to, obviously in terms of like where to focus our building efforts and marketing efforts and things like that. So we've got two sides, we've got users and merchants, which person do we care about? We have like 6 people at that stage. I mean, we can't do all the things and we have no money. So the question is more like which bit do we try and hack? We ended up going with merchants, basically A, because that's what other people are doing, and B, because merchants are the people that eventually should give us money, which is probably a good heuristic. Anyway, so our market responses were pretty damn encouraging. So what happened is that we thought, okay, cool, let's try and do more of this, but we needed a way to get users to actually use this regularly. So into early adopters. Early adopters are the greatest thing ever to startups. It's, well, early adopters and traction, maybe. Basically, these are guys who are willing to take chances and try out your product. For SnapScan, the major initial early adopter market was coffee shops. So basically, in Cape Town at that stage, coffee shops were exploding of traditional hipster coffee things. New shops were opening up all over town, and for whatever reason, they didn't have coffee machines initially.
Credit
card machines, thank you. I don't understand the hipsters, man. And another side, I mean, obviously, if guys were willing to spend $20 a day on, hot water, probably count as, wealthy, social, influential, all that kind of stuff. And the other cool thing about coffee is it's addictive, so people sort of, consume it every day. So that was solid one for us. And we completely, I don't want to say we lucked into it, because it also had a lot of hard work. Thanks, Ben. Walking down streets and getting backed by lots of people. More relevant in terms of building things is that this sort of means that we sort of had to start changing the kind of tools we have, because coffee shops have different accounting and billing requirements than sort of your market vendors. It starts getting more formal. Now, all the kind of various things we've been trying, we've been talking sort of about things like, market price problems, early adopters, and having, devs do sales. At a certain stage, it sort of emerged that our primary tech problem is to get the tech to not be a problem while we figure out what the hell we're doing. Honestly, we're actually pretty good at building things. Like talking about hacking things and cowboying. We are actually pretty good at building things. But it turns out that is essentially no real use in the real world. It sort of gets you table stakes, it gets you to the table. And to be clear, it's a gambling table. It's not a table that allows you to eat or anything. And it was a bit of a culture shock. At that stage, as I said, we were 5 devs, completely in sort of a dev world. Hi. We were 5 devs, culture shock, and it was, at the end of the day, a real sort of inflection point for the company in terms of how we approach building things. The first thing that sort of happened is that we kind of went like, okay, cool. This is not a tech problem, or certainly not just a tech problem. So we went for configuration. We were 5 devs and 1 non-dev. To the end of the year, which we miraculously survived. 3 devs and 3 non-devs, and I think actually sort of a temporary salesperson or 2. And this sort of cultural shift ended up being significantly influential for us for the next couple of years as well. I mean, we actively resisted sort of changing into a tech company, because I think that's something that can sort of insidiously very easily happen. So we intentionally kept our dev team quite small at about 4 people. And between the 4 of us, we essentially built this entire SnapScan thing. So, then what happened is that, okay, we started placing our bets now that we had a table, to continue the metaphor. We said, okay, cool, maybe there's something in this mobile payments thing. Let's go and figure out, if we're going to be adults about this, how do we build a grown-up fintech while still trying to do cool things. The risk of been cast out as a heretic. We moved to a monolith, and I liked it. For all the obvious reasons, and include religious debate, less code, easier to build, less things that go wrong. We're not many people, so that I think is a big delta. And we was trying out all kinds of random things the whole time. It's not like we had sort of significant, like 1 month roadmaps, anything like that. So in our specific context, it made lots of sense. Obviously, we got obviously screwed over with technical debt in 3 years' time, but I mean, that's how the life goes, right? But I do think sort of 2017 we will probably still think that's a good move, all in all. Somewhat less controversially, we went like, okay, fine, we probably need to have a real database. Mongo is cool and everything, but I mean, at the end of the day, things like transactions and referential integrity are probably good things to have in the data if you actually care about your data. And I mean, we really didn't know much about database at that stage at all. What we did know was that MySQL kind of silently truncated columns if you didn't configure it correctly, and Postgres didn't. So that seems like a good move. It sort of sounded like they were largely aligned with things we cared about. Again, not losing data. So we went with Postgres, and honestly, I'm super happy about it. It's just like we're very much in the Postgres fan club. For people who don't know anything about data, we managed to not lose any data ever, and we never had to worry about it being in the database at all. It was just, I don't know, we're just so happy about that specific one. And we're obviously then sort of also worrying about taking our internal quality levels a notch up. This is like the development practices, being slightly less cowboy, worrying a bit more about writing tests and things like that. Okay, so at this point we've reached the point of no return. There's no way we're going to be running our stuff ever inside a bank or a corporate. We've always committed to the stack. And at that stage in 2013, a semi-modern stack. You'll note that we were on both Heroku and AWS. The reason that we didn't put everything on Heroku is, A, Heroku has like a slightly bad reputation for uptime, and B, we knew that Heroku doesn't support the compliance that we require. So we're doing card processing, the relevant requirement is PCI compliance. To go along with the stack, we use all the tools we can. These tools are wonderful and great. They make our lives better. We get sort of significant leverage from them. It's great integrating with them. They've got great docs and everything, and we generally love them. On the flip side, we also integrate with Finservices, which are completely the opposite. Now I've seen lots of people complain about Heroku uptime. I don't know who. And GitHub uptime and things like that. So I've arbitrarily checked just now, Heroku uptime for the past, I think a month or 2 months is 4 nines, which is like about 1 hour a year is they're down. Turns out that payments is so much worse. Even if everything is working completely perfectly, and there's nothing going wrong, all the banks are playing along, about 3% of all transactions get declined for a bunch of reasons, and generally things are not working correctly. This was quite a shock to us. We were like, well, this can't be right, it's our PSP that's broken. As I said, we did go through 5 PSPs, we tried charting, all that kind of things, but it turns out this is just how things are. I think at the end of the day, the reason why these things are so broken, not just specific in payments, but in Finservices in general, is roughly 2 reasons. One of them is that the core competency of these guys is just not exposing public APIs. I think the other one is that just enough scale, they just don't have enough people integrating with them. Things just don't work in general. And again, we were quite shocked about this because, I mean, obviously if you integrate with pretty much anything you pay money from the internet, it's going to work. I mean, you're going to have same environments, the same sandbox environment, all that kind of thing, and when you flip the switch and go to production, it just works. Turns out it doesn't work at all, ever, and there's always sort of a significant amount of iteration. And also the integration process itself takes forever. So rather than spending like half a day installing a gem, sort of more like an order of magnitude 3 to 6 months, and the only way to make things go quicker is to go sit next to a dev. once you've integrated, then things just keep on breaking. I've had this sort of naive illusion from swiping my credit card that everything is stable and makes sense, and it turns out that's just not true. Everything just goes down the whole time, and the annoying bit is that upstream providers generally don't always know that they're down. So our tactic there was roughly to monitor the systems and spam them when they do go down. We also tried spamming the kind of devs as bosses, that they will prioritize planning, but I'm not sure if it ever worked. It's also not just peripheral instability, so it's not just the things that are on the edges of the entire network that's broken. It's sort of the intrinsic thing seems to be problematic. So we've had payments that just get lost for no reason. So when you're doing a payment, there's sort of multiple systems, there's multiple levels of things, there's multiple banks and guys sitting in front of banks, and inside the bank there are multiple services to service any specific payment. And nobody seems to understand at all what's going on. Nobody seems to have an overall picture at all. So what will happen is we'll make a payment, and a couple of weeks later it'll just get rolled back, and nobody will know why. And that's felt incredibly strange because it doesn't make any kind of sense. So we had things where we sort of sent out an email query, and we go like, okay, cool, what happened with this payment? And the email will have like 5 forwards in it, and they'll get back to us, and they'll ask us, hey dudes, can you all please check out what happened to this payment? We're like, Okay, so this is obviously crazy. This makes no sense. How do we deal with this? Well, it turns out, I think, pretty much the only way to survive and give some semblance of sanity is to inject lots of humans into the system. Specifically for SnapScan, it's interesting. So I think one of our core differentiators is that we are trying to be a good experience. The other one is maybe that we're trying to open up new payment opportunities. But yes, it sort of feels that in this general space that most of the processes or things are sort of designed with the idea that it's going to be humans involved, and these humans are at some strategic opportunities going to intervene and make bad things go away. I don't know, maybe clients just lose money, I'm not sure. Back to sort of the kind of, so originally I said sort of we really don't want to lose money. So it turns out that losing money for our users primarily originates from upstream things going badly. These kind of failures are obviously outside our control, which is useful as long as our code's fine. But it does mean that ultimately the bit that makes sure that SnapScan doesn't lose money is our ops team. I mean, obviously we've got code that isn't cowboyed and is sort of stable, but ultimately we've got an ops team that weighs a lot and checks all the things and fights for our users and generally manages to ensure that we don't actually lose their money. So, we started off by having our lean startup problem requirements, which is we basically addressed by going, okay, fine, we're going to cowboy this as hard as we can. And we have a not losing money problem. And for this, we have injected lots of humans into the system, which means we still need to worry about security and compliance from the list of regional problems. So during all this, we had an official launch. We signed up like a couple thousand merchants over a very short period of time across the entire country. And obviously, as soon as that kind of thing happens, your actual real risk kind of explodes massively. I mean, we had a specific model for which we designed this kind of thing, and it was okay because it's like a couple of shots of Cape Town. Then it's pretty easy to worry about, if things go wrong. But it's something that's no longer possible. And even worse, it's sort of no longer under control. We're essentially strapped to a roller coaster ride, and we can't get off, but that's fine. Kind of first thing that was non-obvious to us, due to naivety or what you want to call it, is that security and compliance are really not the same thing at all, and they're not that closely related. So initially we was like, well, security is kind of here, and compliance is around it. But it turns out that's not how it works at all. You've got security and you've got compliance over there, and they intersect slightly, at best. So these things are different, so we have to deal with them differently. Security, we have to worry about fraud everywhere, whereas compliance only makes sense to worry for the bits that actually get audited. The reason we care ultimately about either security or compliance is fraud. I'm pretty sure that if you are doing anything that moves real money, you're going to get defrauded at some stage. Getting defrauded might just kill your company, so it's obviously scary. The first encounter we had with fraud, amusingly enough, we started out and we had a kind of refer a friend system. Basically, you could add like a friend with a friend code or something, and both of you got like $20 or something. So what happens is obviously a bunch of students figured out that they can just clone the apps and simulators or things, and open up infinitely many accounts, and get infinitely many coffees. Turns out to be actually sort of an annoying problem to solve, right? Because we can't really make sign up much harder, because then we can't get users easily. On the one hand, on the other hand, we can't really sort of prevent the device from being cloned because it's completely in the user's hand. Fortunately for that specific case, I think we fixed it by just phoning the student, and they stopped for whatever reason. But something else we found interesting that's quite well. So we talked to like a bunch of guys from the bank and so on, and they were like, well, the laws don't really exist yet, which makes sense. I mean, mobile payments don't really exist yet. So yeah, you can show us the guys and so on, but it's probably not going to help you. And it is quite a thing actually. I found sort of really surprising because we know like the phone numbers and so on and the details of the guys that were sort of doing these kinds of things, and you can sort of go and look at their picture and go like, why are you doing this to us? It feels incredibly personal for some stupid reason. So I found that quite surprising. Anyway, more importantly, one of the things in the world I like the most is sort of the idea of having a concept of a risk model, because that's a wonderful thing to make sort of many problems go away. If you don't have a risk model, then basically anything that goes wrong is terrible and the end of the world. If you have a risk model, you get to say, well, we kind of expected things to go wrong, so it's fine. And obviously the amusing thing is that people tend to not be on the same page with regards to what your risk model is, so when it does happen, people go like, and badness ensues. Specifically for SnapScan, but we were primarily worried about is essentially fraud, credit card fraud. What we found useful for us is to just have sort of broad system-wide course limits, like dumb things, like literally if you have like 100 users, you're transacting R1 million worth of coffee a day, then obviously something is not right. We tried a bunch of sort of fancy things to work on this, but from off-the-shelf machine learning things, and also tried in-house things, but ultimately we basically solved our problem just by using a dumb rules-based system. Rules-based system basically means you just sort of look at the merchant and check at the user, and have some pre-configured rules, and between the two of them, we essentially have a very safe environment. Okay, so that's all well and good, but practically going and worrying, okay, so how do you actually secure a startup, and what do you worry about while you're trying to grow it? So we did the obvious kind of thing that any kind of consultancy will do for you, a risk assessment, but we didn't call it that because, we're not a consultancy. We just worried about sort of what the actual risks are. Biggest thing we're obviously worried about is probably something like card numbers. There's sort of significant sort of monetary fines associated with having compromised card details on your system and it gets stolen. It's like stupid fines. So we basically went and said, okay, cool, we're never going to store credit card details, and basically eliminate that entire class of problems. Obviously there's been a bunch of times when it would have been super useful to have credit card details for all kinds of cool acts, but all good. And obviously you also have to worry about things like bad guys from outside. You have to worry about bad guys from inside. Like inevitably at some stage you're going to grow and you're going to have someone who likes gambling or something. And you sort of also just have to worry about people being not great at securing their own computers, like picking bad passwords. practically this means for us that as we were building the company, we had to worry about making security sort of part of everybody's life. We can't just, it's not just a dev thing, because obviously everybody's working with sort of confidential data and scary data. And it's also pretty damn good excuse to just give everybody Macs. They generally Macs work, which is nice, so you don't have to bother spending time on sort of IT ops. And the kind of cool thing is they used to be pretty good at effectively mitigating sort of the really scary things. Up until like, I don't know, a month ago or something. Something went horribly wrong. And also we found sort of significant practical value in just sort of helping people and educating them with like incredibly dumb things. To sort of just help them have better security practices. I mean, given the information age we all live in, there's so much sort of critical sensitive data of a personal nature that everybody has on the internet. So I think it's sort of actually valuable for people to just be better at protecting their own crucial data. I mean, it's just like literally dumb things, like using two-factor authentication on all their things, and putting on full disk encryption, and having proper password management and so on. And these things are super easy and super cheap to do, but whatever. Obviously, building secure things. We hack lots of things. We try hacking lots of things wherever we possibly can. We were pretty good at never compromising on security though, I think generally. Interestingly enough, it's not been too expensive. I mean, obviously there's some kind of cognitive load, but I don't think it cost us that much. Obviously, also we focused on the app layer. That's when we obviously outsource all our sort of low-level things. So I mean, things like worrying about network firewalls, security, and like operating system level security. I mean, those things are all completely irrelevant in 2017, well, also 2013. Just because AWS is doing it better than you can anyway, so why bother? Application level security is fortunately a much more fun problem anyway, because firewall rules are boring, and worrying about things like timing attacks is like a heck of a lot more interesting. So basically what we did is we worried about making sure that everybody on teams, that sort of the basic knowledge. I mean, it's not rocket science, right? It's like, what's top 10? I don't know if you guys know it. It's basically just a list of the top 10 major security vulnerabilities in web apps. Obviously you'll use Rails mostly and other sort of security guides, and we just make sure we know about it, but the key is obviously to integrate in all our development processes and worry about it. And when we build things, we worry, okay, is it going to break all the things or not? Now compliance is horrible. Compliance does not like change, for obvious good reasons. It's meant to make sure that things stay stable and sane and secure and all those kind of things. So compliance is essentially toxic to rapid iterations and failing fast. One major worry is PCI compliance. We are unfortunately at sort of the highest level of PCI compliance, which means that we literally couldn't figure out a way to hack it, which I found quite sad. What we could do is we could optimize it, and what we did is we sort of did significant research essentially, and or trial and error, to figure out what the actual exact rules are, what the scope is, so we can find out, okay, cool, these are the kind of things that have to be in scope. We went and we firewalled it off as hard as we could, in the sense that we made like a single AWS account and checked all the things there, and we can go like, cool, there are the things, go look at that if you care about us being compliant. And obviously we regularly rely on AWS actually being compliant for most things. But yeah, compliance is horrible, but also a good thing. Come on. I don't know. It turns out that, I don't know, something that most frustrates me about having people talk about startups is that occasionally they'll just go and, make it sound like from the beginning they knew exactly what they were doing. So it's sort of this straight line journey, that these answers, this is like obviously how the world view was, and they were correct. That was absolutely not how we saw the world. We find it to be incredibly messy and confusing and frustrating the whole time. And we had to sort of significantly change the way we saw the world from sort of a tech-oriented company to sort of a product-oriented one. And I think sort of that's what makes Sure Fruit so interesting here today. I think it's sort of a chance to sort of focus on stuff that actually matters. We've much less spend on something than we had. So I'm super keen to see what you guys do. Thank you.